Welcome to the Art of Becoming Whole, where we explore the edges of the human experience from the therapy room to the meditation cushion and beyond. My name is Kevin Stansbury. I am a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and spiritual freak.
And my name is Justin Tang. I'm a certified hypnotist, a psychotherapy grad student, future licensed clinician. And I don't know if I'm a spiritual freak, but uh it is interesting that you mentioned that. I have an interesting relationship with spirituality, and this podcast is forcing me to confront, not forcing me to confront it. That sounds very violent. It is making me think through some things. So I don't know. I'm neither a spiritual freak, or maybe I am, but I would say more than spiritually curious. So
Trying to think what's like a you're a mild freak. You're a little bit freaky.
a mild freak, yes. On the freakiness level, I am on the mild side.
So I don't know if we'll talk about this, but I was just curious about uh did you call it a therapeutic rupture?
Yeah,
I think that's an interesting topic. I was wondering about that.
sure. I think it is an interesting topic. I don't know if I'm like I could definitely explore it. I want to learn more about it, especially how to repair it, right? I think that's a very important lesson or skill that a therapist has. Because like a therapeutic rupture is going to happen generally. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions, but it's going to happen. And I guess maybe we should define it, right? Like what do we mean by that? Um, Anytime we enter into some kind of therapeutic relationship, whether it's with a healer, a coach, a practitioner, a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever, um, there's a particular kind of relationship that that creates. And part of the healing process is understanding that the relationship itself is also healing and a very vital component to what leads to what we want, wholeness, right? Becoming whole. And with every relationship, no relationship is going to be absolutely perfect. We might say something that might be interpreted a way, we might do something or not do something. And it's this kind of this dance between two people with all of their flaws, insecurities, but also all of their amazing attributes and their positive qualities, the things that make them unique. And so it's always this like constant dance, right? This co-creation. And so in this relationship, there will be ruptures, right? There might be a moment where if I'm with a therapist will say something, I might interpret it a certain way because maybe that's how my mother treated me, or that's how my father treated me, or this reminds me of a sibling or whoever, right? It might tell us something a little bit more about what's going on unconsciously. So that's like a really roundabout way of saying what a therapeutic um, rupture would be. And again, also part of the therapeutic process is how do we repair these things? That's where like a lot of the healing occurs. That they happen, that these ruptures happen, that's a given. But how do we repair these things? And by doing so, can we foster more wholeness? So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yes. Okay, so you were saying that the way you were defining rupture there is
Hmm.
that something happens in the communication that triggers something in the client, that it could be like some sort of projection, or perhaps a misinterpretation of what the therapist's intention is, or how they're coming across or something.
Yes. Usually that's how I guess we're more focused on like unconscious processes, right? So that could be one thing. But I'll let me expand the definition because sometimes just we're human and we F up, you know? We just do something stupid. And maybe it doesn't mean anything, right? Um, maybe it's a thing on the therapist side, right? It could be uh yeah, it could be anything that seems to create tension between a client and the practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like even like suppose suppose like I really wanted internal family systems uh techniques and modality. I'm coming to you like I know I really just want to do internal family systems. But then if you say, for example, you just do something else, right? You just ignore my request. Something like that would create some kind of a rupture, right? There would be a break in rapport, a break in rapport. And if we have a break in rapport, if there's no conscious alliance, right? If we can't agree on like, hey, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z things, these are your goals, um, and this is how we're gonna get there. If we can't have agreement on that on like a conscious level, then we're definitely not gonna have agreement on an unconscious level. So I feel like it has to start conscious and then unconscious. Uh, but yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but hopefully added to that definition.
Okay. So it could be we're talking about transference and countertransference. So like transference being when the client is projecting something onto the therapist or interpreting something the therapist is saying through a past lens or emotional experience, and it colors it. And countertransference being when it goes from therapist to client. But then you're also just talking about little moments that might not be that deep, where it's just like something happens to disrupt the rapport or
Yes.
the connection, um, or maybe the therapist says something harmful.
Yeah. Yeah, that could, I mean, that'll definitely do it.
um, hmm. I mean, I hear so many horror stories about therapy. I I hear so many horror stories, and then I hear so many, I wouldn't call them horror stories, but just like uh mediocre mediocrity stories. um, but like just stories where people are coming to therapy and they're just so disappointed by the process. Um, you're
Yeah,
one of those.
yeah. So if you're listening to audio, I'm raising my hand here. Yeah. Do you want me to tell you my story and then you can tell a story and we'll just sit here telling stories?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, this was a long time ago, right? And it's interesting because growing up, I never considered therapy. I think partly because I'm Asian, partly because of the time period, right? It was like it wasn't cool back then, right? And like it is now. Um, and I just never like it just never occurred to me. Like I had no grid, I had no language for anything. Depression, anxiety, I have no idea. So I think several years ago I went to my first therapist. And the reason I was open to it was because I read a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, who is a psychologist. And I went to this one therapist because a coworker recommended this person. I mean, like sang his praises, right? Like, oh my gosh, this guy's helped me so much. Like, I'm like, oh wow, like if my coworker is recommending this person, I definitely want to do this. And I never, this is my first time ever going to therapy. Never gone to therapy. Now, my idea of therapy was it's going to be different from coaching, right? Coaching, as it's traditionally defined, is like, well, you're looking forward to things. It's going to help you get to your goals. Whereas therapy is more traditionally defined as, well, but we're looking at the past and resolving some things in the past, right? Something like that. I'm sure I didn't have that conscious definition, but there's some part of me that knew that therapy was supposed to be about like, oh, we're gonna like talk about childhood stuff, right? Resolve childhood issues. That's what I thought. I had no idea about all these different orientations, psychodynamic, CBT, ACT, all the T's and whatnot, humanistic. I had no idea, right? I just went to the therapist because I was recommended. And I remember like, and maybe this says something about my personality and maybe something to work on, right? I remember going there the very first session, right? The intake, right? The whole like tell me your story and I'm just like, oh, I'm sharing all this stuff about my parents and da, da, da. And then and I just remember all of a sudden he's like, oh, okay, time's up. He's writing this receipt. Rip. Here you go. And I was just stunned. I was just like, I just spent $90 just talking, just like ranting. And thank God I had great insurance, but I didn't know if it was going to go through or not. But so for all intents and purposes, I just paid $90 and I'm like, what just transpired? But I kept going, right? I kept going. This is pre-COVID. I kept going thinking that, okay, there's like a cumulative effect, right? Like, okay, this is like yes, I just poured out my soul so he can get a feel for things and then we'll start doing more work, right? And it's not to say that like things that he said or questions he asked and some of the sessions, they were helpful. I'm not saying they weren't helpful at all, especially because I was kind of transitioning out of Christianity and he kind of knew a little bit about that. So I'm grateful that, I could kind of, have a sounding board there and have someone kind of be empathetic about my situation. But I swear, like, other than like the few like CBT little reframes that he did, I just felt like I just talked about my life, like my present life, not like I rarely talked about the past, um, if I remember correctly. Um, and I would just go back every day, or sorry, every week. I would talk about my life, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, time's up. Here we go. And then I drive home, and I like every week I'd be like, nothing's changed, nothing's happening. Like, but I kept like convincing myself because I think I was like such a people pleaser, right? That I couldn't even tell him that like, hey, I don't think this is working. Like, can we focus on my childhood or something? Or, I couldn't even do that because I was such a people pleaser. Um, and where was I going with that? Yeah, like every week I would just be like, why am I going here? Why am I doing this? And so, I guess the reason I was doing it is because my insurance covered like a lot. So I had, like really great insurance. So I just kept going. Um,
Good reason.
yeah, and again, it's not like any like horror story or anything. It's not like it was just I didn't know why I was going. Like we talked about my present life, and then nothing seemed to be changing. Like I got more, and I hate this because there's some really really great therapists out there, and I believe in therapy, which is why I'm going to be one, right? And there's like really really great coaches out there too. So I don't think they're necessarily antagonistic towards one another. But I was getting more therapeutic value from my coach. I think you remember him. It was Ruse, and like we were doing like really deep like emotional releasing work, somatic stuff, and inner child. And I didn't know this at the time, but we were basically doing some type of regression work, right? I just didn't know what to call it, but like we were really digging into these deeply unconscious things. And then therapy, it just seemed like very just surface level. It was strange. So it wasn't until my next therapist that I really thought like I liked her style much better. And even just asking me the question, like, so what would you like to focus on today? Just having that question alone, and maybe that's not everyone's like deal, right? Like everyone has a different experience in therapy. They kind of want different things from therapy, which I totally get. But for me, you know, just talking about my life didn't cut it. And like just by her asking the question and focusing, like, what do you want from this session? What do you and it forces me to really think about it like, oh, I want to work on this. Great. And then we start doing things and she would, pull out internal family systems and things like that, right? And we do like more like somatic stuff, in my opinion. So yeah, dude, that was my experience. And I'm sitting here thinking like, why did this coworker recommend this guy? I mean, he's not a bad person. It wasn't like he was a bad person, right? Like there were helpful elements to it, but I'm just thinking like maybe like my coworker had like no self-awareness at all, and maybe like it just didn't seem super helpful for me. But that was my experience. Um, your mileage may vary. I'm sure he is the right therapist for some other people. So, and he was a family marriage therapy, so maybe it was, maybe he has like much more better results and experiences and uh, uh dealings with family and marriage. So I don't know. Anyways,
You're giving a lot of benefit of the doubt there.
I'm trying to, and by the way, this guy was like, uh, I don't want to give out too many details, right? Like, I don't like putting people under the bus. But let's say like he went to a private school that's very well known in this area. Like, if you go to this private school, this university, it's like, oh wow, okay,
Mm.
it's well respected. So like he was like went to a very well respected university, and so I'm like, yeah. Oh, this is great. This is gonna be great. To be fair, I was a hard client. I'm an easier client now, but I was a pretty difficult client. But yeah, it's just my experience, and I was just like, man, yeah,
And so many people have a similar experience, and then they say things like, well, I don't need to go to therapy because I could just talk to my friends. It's like, well, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. If all that's happening is you're going and venting about stuff, or yeah, just talking the way you would to a friend, then I understand why you might have that perception.
Yeah, and I think there are like, and I'm sure it's not a lot, but there are therapists out there that really view their role as like a friend. So yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure, in the last few conversations, hopefully we've fleshed out a slightly better understanding of what therapy is. Maybe not perfectly, but um, yeah, so I'm interested. This turned into therapy horror stories. Um, what have you heard?
Okay, so I remember a story a friend told me years ago, um, maybe like 16 years ago. And he went to a therapist, had really bad anxiety, really bad social anxiety, and they had the session. And at the end of the first session, the therapist says, "My goal working with you is to make you popular." Oh, your face.
Well, I understand. Okay, I'm trying to. I see the positive intention behind it. I understand. Part of me
No, no,
wants to
no.
say like it's not like like a totally.
No,
I
no, no.
understand
Don't
why. I,
don't make excuses for this person. That's awful, man.
So what is your friend? Well, I don't know if I want
I
to dig
don't
too much into it, but
I don't remember what his response was, but he didn't go back.
yeah.
Um,
I guess he didn't get popular, man. Sucks for your friend. Oh.
but yeah,
I
I mean that sounds like I don't know, like if you were going to a pickup artist coach or something, like that sort of approach, then maybe that makes more sense. I don't know. But from a psychotherapeutic standpoint, that's like it's almost like the way I think about it, it's like the therapist wasn't even listening.
hmm.
And maybe that's not fair. Maybe he was listening, but I don't even know what world he was living in or like the
I think
interpretation.
yeah, I think he was putting his or her, I don't know, is the therapist a guy?
Yes,
Uh, I
I
guess he
think.
was putting his assumptions into the goal, which
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. Yeah, so luckily my friend didn't go back to that one. I did hear some other story. I was trying to remember. There are I consider myself a spiritual therapist. Um, and I love to get into conversations with people about philosophy, spirituality, religion, all of it to me. Basically, anything's fair game. Sometimes people are like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to talk about this. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like everything, the psyche involves everything. So everything is fair game. Um, but I also remember hearing as I was coming up in the mental health world that we should refer people out to have conversations about spirituality with professionals that are specifically trained in that, like a pastor or a monk or a chaplain or whatever.
Hmm.
And I just think that's pretty much bullshit.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, I mean, I could see a time to do that, but just to have conversations, no. I mean, this is about when you get into that stuff, especially people who have some sort of belief or experiences with spirituality or religion, but even just talking about philosophy, it is the foundation of your perceptual lens. And so if we're not talking about that, what are we doing?
Hmm. I'm
Yes.
pausing because I don't know if I fully agree.
I don't know if I fully agree, but yeah, do it. Poke holes in
See,
that
my
shit.
my 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 Christian upbringing just popped up, right?
Oh,
And this is the way that I thought as well, right? Because it's like if we're not talking about things concerning salvation and eternity and all these deep questions, questions about uh your worldview, your the very lens in which you see the entire world, right? Well then uh what are we doing, right? So why did that pop up? I guess that could be used in a way to steer people towards a certain way of thinking. Maybe that's my hesitation.
yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, because it's like I could stick to and sometimes I do. It depends on the person, depends what's happening. But I could stick to examining the worldview and perceptual lens as it relates to uh, the family of origin system dynamics, and then their present life and their relationships and their job, and like there's so much you can touch on without getting into the greater context of, well, how do you perceive the world and how do you think about culture and politics and what is life, what is the meaning and purpose of life, and that sort of stuff. So there is, I think it's possible to address the smaller sphere of experience without addressing the larger context. But to me, that's missing a very important piece. And it doesn't have to be spiritual and it doesn't have to be religious, but it has to be examining your philosophy.
It sounds very existential.
Yes, I suppose so.
I assume I mean I'm not trained in it in existential therapy, so but I assume that it would probably be along the same lines. I don't know.
The way I think about it is, for example, if I believed that it's a dog eat dog world and survival of the fittest, and you just gotta get out there and just be disciplined and work hard to get yours, and it's okay if you have to step on other people, like that's just part of it. Like this is a philosophy, and this is going to touch every area of your life. This is going to affect
Hmm.
your interpersonal relationships with basically everybody in your life. It's going to affect how you view your it's tied to your identity, so it's going to affect how you view yourself, and then it affects how you're being in the world.
Hmm.
And so if that's not addressed, then I mean, like I said, you could address other things, but there's this pretty central thing there.
Would you say that that could also be described as like a core belief?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
comfortable with that terminology. But, you said something really interesting to me, which is you were saying that the initial thing I was saying was it sounded like it could be used to try to get someone to think in a particular way. You said something like that, or like view things in a particular way.
Oh, sorry. I was like, what are we talking about? Okay, yes. And by it you mean uh questioning these very like foundational philosophy questions or lenses of which you view the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't I mean I could say more on that. I think I just had a knee-jerk reaction because it just sounded so much like my old Christian self. And it's not to say like I still love this stuff. I still love talking about what is the foundation of reality, what and your worldview. And I do believe that we operate on certain presuppositions. Everyone does. And we should look at these presuppositions. Maybe they're good ones, maybe they're bad ones, maybe they're neutral ones, who knows? But yeah, absolutely. Like the unexamined life is not worth living. Absolutely. I agree with that. Um, yeah, I guess where was I going with that? With my knee-jerk reaction, I think. Yeah, I think it's just yeah, it opens up I feel like it opens up the door to a certain kind of like proselytization and evangelizing. I think maybe that's my concern.
Yeah, and this is what I want to talk about, because there's a line somewhere and I'm really curious about it. And because what is the purpose of psychotherapy? I mean, we've kind of talked about this in previous episodes, but there's different aspects of it. And I think we were talking about it in the context of becoming whole or being whole and that stuff. But another way of saying a similar thing, I think, is it is supporting somebody with coming into a clear seeing of reality.
Yes.
And so that gets interesting because what is a clear seeing of reality?
Agreed.
And if I'm the guide, I'm guiding someone into a clearer seeing of reality. There's different ways to do this. And the way that most people were talking about when I was being trained was more of a CBT lens of just ask an insane amount of questions until they realize stuff for themselves.
I,
But sorry, yeah, go ahead, go
I
ahead.
guess I'm wondering if I do that. That's why I'm laughing. I'm like, oh, I kind of do. I'm very Socratic. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, me too. I mean, I definitely do that, but it seemed to me like at some point it was not real for me, at least. Like if I were to do that, it wouldn't be being in a real relationship
mm,
because I felt like I couldn't just have an honest conversation with someone. And actually I felt like it was manipulative because I could see something, but then I can't say it. I just have to ask manipulative questions to try to get you to see it. And it's like, how come I can't treat you like an adult who's capable of understanding things? And I just say, you know what I see? This. What do you think about that?
well, that's a question though too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah. I mean, it's a combination because yeah, I'm kind of went blank, but I guess I do that. I do. I don't feel like leading somebody with questions is inherently wrong.
Not at all. No, I don't think so either. But it just seemed like it was an absolute.
Hmm,
That's how it was presented at this time, 10 years ago or whatever.
got it.
Um, and I didn't like that. And it just it's like I could beat around the bush for 8 weeks, 8 sessions of asking questions while somebody's circling the thing and they're getting a little closer and a little closer. Or I could just fucking say it like, hey, there's this thing I'm noticing. And it just depends. It depends on the person. It depends on the moment. I think it takes a certain sensitivity and attunement to be able to know when is the right time.
Yeah, yeah.
But taking a step back, I was talking about this clear seeing of reality. And if we're having a conversation about the nature of reality, and from my perspective, we have the capacity to come into a clear seeing about the true nature of reality. But historically, this has been an off limit topic in a way because it ventures into the world of belief. So they say. But what I'm talking about isn't belief, it's direct experience.
And when you say belief, do you mean like faith as in religions? Is that what you kind of mean?
I have a different view of faith, but I guess yes, religious faith we could say,
Right,
or dogmatic faith.
right.
Yeah, and so then I could be having a conversation with someone and providing psychoeducation or pointers about the true nature of reality, and it just starts to get into this like a little bit of a dicey territory because a lot of people would be like, well, there's no evidence for that.
Yeah.
What are you basing that on? And how is your belief or how is your experience of this thing different than someone's experience of Jesus in their heart?
Right. Exactly.
And so then is it a belief? But I'm saying it's not. I'm saying I have beliefs about it, but the actual experience is it's a clear seeing of reality. There isn't some sort of dogmatic interpretation of it. It just is what it is. This oneness. And that it's replicable for anybody.
Interesting. That's an interesting claim.
Yeah, I always loved how Ken Wilber would talk about meditation. Uh, at least I think this was him, but he was saying that it's an experiment. You run an experiment every time in the laboratory of your own awareness,
Mm.
and it's replicable. You do these practices, you have this experience.
Yeah,
Everybody.
right. But, and here's my pushback. I don't know if we can escape this. Is that even if there are no dogmatic religious interpretations, there still is an interpretation. Like we are still influenced by our upbringing, our culture, society, and all the different systems, the microsystems, the macro systems, and all these things. Like we still, yeah, we still have to interpret some things. Like for example, I think my last trip on LSD, I saw Jesus. It wasn't like a clear vision or anything. It was just, in my mind, uh, just like a fuzzy vision of Jesus on the cross or being nailed or something. I still have to interpret that. I could have interpreted like a Christian and be like, oh, okay, this is my comeback to Jesus moment. Jesus is calling me back, and I just need to surrender my life. You know, um, that could be one interpretation, but I took it a different way. I felt that this was a symbol from my unconscious that was very, familiar to me, and it represented something. It represented a life of sacrifice, perhaps a life of I forget what I wrote in my journal. I'd had to dig it up, but it was like yeah, it was like a life of service, the beauty of service, the beauty of sacrifice and of love. Um, and I didn't take it to mean that I needed to like give my life to Jesus and go back to church and all that. So I still had to interpret that. And now I guess you could say like, well, that wasn't like a direct experience. Maybe it was maybe a layer removed or two layers removed. I don't know. Right. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how you define direct experience. So like, would you say if Jesus came to me in this like dream or something, would that be like a direct experience?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, because you're also touching on the influence of the unconscious, and that there could be something in the unconscious that it's a perceptual lens. So it separates you from the contents of experience, or it colors.
Yes.
There's a separation there, and it colors the perception
Yes.
of experience, and bakes in interpretation into the direct experience potentially.
Potentially. I
um
guess I guess what I'm saying is like there has to be, in my view, there's always some kind of interpretation.
Always.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I'm of two minds. um I don't even know how to begin to talk about this. um because I could be on ayahuasca, and I could have a direct experience of interacting with my ancestors, or traveling to another plane of reality or something. I never got to have those fun ones. Just lots of
Yeah, I
vomiting.
mean, yeah, I know.
um, Vomiting up snakes. But but I did have a profound experience. Now, yeah, my mind is wandering. So I'll just stick with my original point. So yeah, I could have this experience of my ancestors traveling to another plane of existence. I've never done 5-MeO DMT, but I could do that, and I could, blast off, go meet with the machine elves or whatever, and that's a direct experience
Right. Yeah.
of some kind. Those types of experiences are, I want to call them either peak experiences or fleeting, and and they're open to interpretation. It's like you have the experience, you're, I guess, perceiving the machine elves or bouncing aliens or whatever.
Yeah.
And uh but then you come back to your waking state of awareness, and then there's some sort of interpretation process that happens. Like, what was that? What does it mean?
Right. Right.
Um, those experiences are interesting because they seem not as influenced by, potentially at least, by unconscious stuff. Like, it's just like, why would you see machine elves, and why do many people see them? Like, it's not just an isolated incident.
Yeah.
And well, and now if you're into psychedelics, you've heard Terence McKenna talk about machine elves, and then you do DMT, and then you see machine elves, and now we
Right.
don't know.
Exactly. That's yeah, that's the confounding variable, right?
Yeah. And maybe that's to your point. The it would be the same thing, not on psychedelics, having an experience of oneness. I've done so much reading about non-duality, the experience of oneness. I've heard so many teachings about it, that would that not color the experience itself?
Yeah.
And it's an impossible thing to argue against, I think. However, I'm going to try.
All right.
So, what I like to talk to people about, I teach meditation and mindfulness in therapy, and it's something that I love to do, and feels really important to me. So I do it with basically everybody, almost. And one of the foundations of these practices, one of the foundational experiences that you can have when you start engaging with these practices, is most people who have not done these practices have the experience that awareness and thought move at the same speed. So there's no separation, there's no gap in between thoughts. It's
Right.
just thought after thought after thought. And that's the experience. And if you try to meditate and slow down and pay attention to your breath, your mind is just fucking babbling away. And that's the beginner's experience. But probably not that long after getting into practicing on a semi-regular basis, you could start to see that there is actually a gap between thoughts. There's a process that happens prior to thought, prior to the description of events. You observe events before you describe them. And I remember there's this Buddhist teacher, Daniel P. Brown, who's dead now, but he had some great stuff. And I was listening to an interview, and I don't remember all the specifics, but he was saying that they did studies on this, that there was some machine that they used that could measure the speed of thought, and it was whatever, however many milliseconds or something. Um, and maybe he was saying that this machine could measure up to the speed of light or something. I don't remember, but whatever. He said that awareness moves faster than the machine can measure.
That's really interesting that they could actually measure awareness.
Yeah, I don't know how they were doing that. I'd have to look it
Yeah.
up.
Hmm.
But I want to, yeah. Let me
Hmm.
see. Let me see if I can remember the name of the machine. Kind of just making up a word. No, I have no idea. Okay.
Ah,
Well, um, so anyway, that's what he was saying. And this wasn't a guy to just make random claims. So I just believed him. um, but anyway, but it's also my experience. So that's part of why I believed what you're saying, because I can see it happen. That my senses, and I don't even know if it's limited by senses, by the normal senses at least, but there is an awareness and observation of what's happening. Then there's a description, and that the more you practice meditation, maybe particular types of meditation, the more you practice mindfulness, you can increase this gap.
right.
And so, it's like some of these great spiritual awakening teachers, they ask this question, well, who are you when you don't think about who you are? Sounds like a Zen koan.
It does, yeah. That's actually a great therapy question, honestly.
Right. I agree.
I'm gonna have to write that one down, test it out. Yeah.
And so that's what I'm talking about, that you can have an experience of direct perception prior to description. So then it's not colored by interpretation, because interpretation is going to live in that realm of description. But if there's no description and you're experiencing it, then it
Mm,
is. It is what it is. But then, of course, the second I start talking about it, now I'm interpreting.
right. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, yeah, there's that. But, but I think there are more or less accurate interpretations. And there are more accurate interpretations that can, in Zen, there's a saying, it's like something like, don't mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon.
Right. Right.
And it's like that. I think there are more accurate interpretations that can act as good pointers so that someone can then have a direct experience of the thing. Uh, but that's not the same as like me presenting the moon and saying, this is the thing. What I'm doing is I'm talking about these pointers to have this experience that is uh, trans-rational. It's
Mm,
beyond the rational level
mm.
of experience. But I have to dip into the rational in order to communicate.
Right. Right. And I think this is where you're talking about that fine line, and I'm also trying to figure out that fine line because I don't know if I would talk to any of my clients about this, unless they asked. So I don't know my question. What is the line? This stuff is what is beyond beyond psychotherapy, right? Uh, yeah.
But I think it shouldn't be, because this is, again, I mean, if if one of the goals of psychotherapy is to, we could say, be free of suffering, or at least greatly decrease it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And if having this experiential realization of the nature of reality, which also means the nature of yourself, your own awareness, if that is one of the most profound things a person can experience that impacts your level of peace and or suffering, then leaving that out is a huge mistake. Well, we're going to leave it out just because there's some sort of um, cultural bias against it, because it starts to sound too out there, or too in the realms of I don't know, personal interpretation or whatever. But this is stuff that's been practiced for thousands of years with the same result. How many times do we have to conduct an experiment to decide that this is, oh, the hypothesis seems to be accurate? Now, whether you call this thing God or not, huge interpretation. Kind of. I mean, to me, it's just obviously God, but sure, I'm willing to say that that's my interpretation. I know, like, Sam Harris talks about, Sam Harris.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He talks about non-duality,
Yeah.
um, from a non-spiritual perspective.
Yep.
And fine. I'm fine with that. Kind of. I'm mostly fine with that. But
Yeah.
his argument, and I'll probably butcher it because I I haven't listened to him in a long time, but just is that there's the direct experience of non-duality. Non-dual awareness is non-dual. Actually, I don't know exactly how far he takes this, but whatever. It's, you can have this experience and it can bring you great peace. It can decrease suffering, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything spiritual about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if he gets into. I I think he doesn't. I think he doesn't get into believing that uh, that all a physical manifestation is an emanation of consciousness. I think he doesn't get into that. But to me, that's a direct experience. So that's where him and I would argue, probably. And I think his wife, somebody told me this, so it could not be true. But I think she has written a book about it, and she's more of the belief that um, that we are receivers of consciousness, that consciousness is fundamental, and it is,
Hmm.
I think, within everything. I think she would probably say, and that we are receivers of it. I think he's of the belief that we're generators of it, if I'm not mistaken. Am I mistaken? Sorry, Sam Harris. I don't know. I don't know what you think.
Um, that is interesting. Generating versus receiving. I'm not sure exactly what that means, when they're talking about that. If by receiving they mean consciousness is fundamental to reality.
Um,
I don't know, because in my mind, okay, I could see it either way.
yeah, he posits, thanks AI. According to AI,
Yeah,
he posits that consciousness is a product of the brain,
got it.
but it is also an emergent property of the nervous system. This means that
Mm.
while consciousness depends on how the brain functions, it is not tied to any single part of the brain. He argues that consciousness is both caused by and realized in the brain, a view that aligns with the perspective of philosopher John Searle. Uh, this perspective suggests that the brain is not merely a receiver or a generator of consciousness, but rather that consciousness is an intrinsic part of brain activity.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, there you
Yeah. Yeah. But so bringing this back to therapy.
go. we go
Yeah.
we go so far.
We could. Yeah. Um, could play devil's advocate here and say, well, we have been incorporating this into therapy. Third wave CBT has incorporated mindfulness, things like acceptance and commitment therapy and dialectical behavior therapy. And so there's a lot of studies being done. And so, and mindfulness is this like, has been this hot topic, right? Very in vogue, very popular. So it has been part of the broader discussion and incorporated into therapy.
Yes, but they stop short of where where I'm going. And what we're talking about, because like DBT, I'm going through DBT with some people right now, and I love DBT. It's great because I love Buddhism. It's Buddhism. They just they just repackage Buddhism for Westerners. Um,
Fascinating. Yeah.
and she did a great job, and there's so much good stuff in it. Um, and but the worksheets, they they dip a toe in. Like there's some aspects of practicing mindfulness where there's a part where it's talking about practicing one mindfully, um and and they talk about radical acceptance, and it's like it's so right there, but they don't just say it. Like this is non-dual. You can't practice radical acceptance without non-duality. That's why it's radical. We could have a whole conversation about
I
radical acceptance right now, but
no. I really this is where I'm still like not clear on, right? Because I want to communicate acceptance and non-judgment and non-resistance and all these concepts into my work. And I feel like I'm coming up with more and more analogies. I think it's getting better as I think more about it, making more connections, but I've always seen it as I have culturally appropriated Buddhism to then help with my emotional life, right? To view emotions in a certain way and to relieve suffering, alleviate suffering. And so you saying that you can't you can't really truly understand radical acceptance without just accepting non-duality. Part of me thinks that is true because that's how I started, right? I got none of this would probably have made any sense unless somebody gave me a framework with non or like a yeah, like a semi begin like a very beginner level way of understanding a framework for non-duality. That's probably true that I probably needed that. Let me ask you this. Why can't you still come from duality and practice and embody radical acceptance?
you can.
Ah.
So I lied. No, but this is the problem with non-dual. Well, I'll call it non-dual thought, which is a funny phrase anyway. But it's that it's seemingly contradictory. It's paradoxical. And so the non-dual, not to get too in the weeds, but we do that. The non-dual is the dual. It is in there. So it almost doesn't matter. Almost. But then it also profoundly matters. So again, fucking contradictions. But
Right.
it just is. It just is what it is. So you can absolutely practice radical acceptance through a dualistic lens, and it'll take you to a certain point, and it'll be super helpful. It will decrease suffering. It's going to be great, really. But it'll just take you to that point, and then if you can't do the flip that happens at that point, or you don't, it's not that you can't do it, but you just don't have a context for it, then you're just not going to get the full the full effect, the
Hmm.
trans the transforming yourself, your experience of life to the core.
Right. Right.
Because I love talking about radical acceptance because it's such a great doorway into non-duality. Because it's like we're talking about accepting the whole the whole thing, the whole moment. And so it's like if I'm experiencing deep grief, then to be in this experience of radical acceptance of it. No, I don't want to do grief. I'll do anxiety. I'm experiencing anxiety. To be in radical acceptance of it, I'm allowing it to be the way that it is. But then my mind, perhaps a part of my mind, a part of me, is resisting the anxiety, doesn't want the anxiety to be there, and I'm accepting and allowing that. And then another part of me is trying to implement some strategies or tools to ground myself or to increase my capacity to hold the anxiety, which kind of looks like trying to change the experience. And I'm creating space for that. And so, and on and on. And so I'm getting all these different, seemingly contradictory dimensions within the same experience. And that's at least approaching non-duality. Now, I'm going to go off the rails here.
Sure.
um, so had mentioned this experience that I've been having in the last week to you, and we didn't get into it yet. And I'm not going to probably not going to get into all of it here, but actually I was thinking about a past ayahuasca experience that I had, and it was one of the most powerful ceremonies that I had. And it was so powerful because up until this point, I had so much resistance to the nausea. I hate being nauseous. I hate throwing up. And I have throughout my life, I have fought to the bitter end to not throw up. Like if I got the spins or something when I was younger, I would just like use all my willpower to not tip over the edge. And most of the time I could do it. Ayahuasca doesn't let that
Yeah.
happen. so so I had a couple ceremonies of resisting for hours and hours on end, which made it really painful and difficult. And then in this ceremony, something happened, and the resistance just left,
Hmm.
and I was just like, let's fucking vomit, let's do it. And I sure did. I threw up
Yeah.
more than I ever have in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I was having this experience of throwing up snakes into the bucket. I was just seeing snakes come out of my mouth as I was throwing up. And it would take me to this point where I felt like I can't possibly handle this anymore. Like the vomiting has to stop. And then it would stop. right there,
Oh,
and every time. And I believe that these plant medicines have some sort of wisdom in them, and they have a spirit to them, and that there's an intelligence there. And ayahuasca never gives me anything I can't handle. It takes me right past the point that I believe that I can handle, and then stops. And so it would do that, and then the nausea would completely dissipate. I would lie down, and I would have this experience of these waves of intense vibration moving through my body. And and it was it was bliss. It was bliss, but it also felt like I was being cleaned out.
hmm,
Like these vibrations would come through, and the way that I'm viewing it right now is it's like pure, unfiltered, non-dual emotional energy.
interesting.
Because it wasn't like, oh, this is happiness, or this is sadness, or this is pain, or this is pleasure. It just was this raw energy. I'm calling it emotional energy, but whatever. I don't know. And in Buddhism, they talk about this a little bit. I've heard Pema Chodron talk about this, where she said pain and joy are the same. And impossible for the mind to understand this. It doesn't make any sense. But she's saying that they're another way she said it is they're two sides of the same coin. The energy of pain is the energy of joy, but they just like show up differently through, I don't know, through, she doesn't say this, but like through our lens of interpretation, or through, I don't know, through something. For some reason, it goes down one channel instead of the other. But that the raw energy is exactly the same energy.
I can believe that.
Why?
In my experience, I think that emotions are just energy, but they're different facets and they're different I hate to say interpretations because I don't feel like that's the right word. Although I'm sure there's an aspect of that, but they're just different forms of energy. And you know, at least in my personal experience, and I do believe that this can be replicated by people, is that you can transmute an emotion from one experience to another. So that's why I'm willing to say that I wouldn't say they're the same, but it is all energy.
You wouldn't you wouldn't say they're the same because
It's like saying a glass of water is the same as an ice cube, is the same as that vapor, right? They're different.
yeah, they're different forms of the same thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was saying this because because I started to have more of that experience, not on ayahuasca, um, that the raw emotional energy, if I'm actually in radical acceptance, that is the experience of whatever the emotion is. It's like I can actually feel the the uh, the foundational components of it the pure energy, undifferentiated. And then it just vibrates through my body, and then it just moves through. There's no stuckness, there's no holding on to it, no need to examine. It just feels, I just feel it fully, and then it changes. But it's like good. It's like aliveness, and there's something inherently good about it. But we could call that an interpretation, but it's what I'm saying is that it's the undifferentiated part feels important, because if I'm really in radical acceptance, I'm not judging it. If I'm not judging it and I'm not resisting it, then what it is seems to, it's like you were saying about water. It's like, instead of it being ice or liquid or vapor, it's like I'm just feeling it on a molecular level where it's all the same.
And you've been having this experience recently.
Yeah. But this is, it's all connected to radical acceptance stuff. But this is why I was saying that I think it is actually important to cross that line into conversations about non-duality, because because it's necessary to understand what's happening, to understand the nature of experience. And then if we can understand the nature of experience and see it clearly, it's, coming back to that, it's about clear seeing, then that's extremely useful. That's why it's radical. It's like you're accepting it beyond the personality. Like some part of you that is not your ego or your personality self or your conditioning or any of it. So there's a deeper part of you that does the accepting. And to even say it does the accepting isn't right, because everything's already accepted there.
Right. So how do you, if you have, bridge that gap with potential clients?
So yeah, it depends. For those who are open to it, and I tell people about my background so they know that I was Buddhist for many years, and have a lot of knowledge about that. And so sometimes I can use that as the entry point, and then I can talk about Buddhist concepts of non-duality, like the groundless ground of being. That's that sort of terminology. And so that's a good entry point. Um, or I mean, I do meditations with people all the time. And so in some of the meditations, I do specific non-dual meditations with people to try to facilitate the direct experience of it, the direct experience of an aspect of being beyond mind, beyond your personality self. And then that can open doors to conversations. Um, and what else do I do? It's just not appropriate for everybody, though. So again, it takes attunement, sensitivity, just paying attention, and then depending on someone's belief system too. A lot of the people that I talk to about it are either agnostic. I'd say basically they're all agnostic or spiritual. Um, However, I do talk to some people who are more religious about it as well, but I can alter the language. Um, but yeah, it's like it's not a stretch for most people, I think, to imagine, or maybe even because they've experienced it to some degree, that there is something greater than me. There's some sort of force that's greater than me. I'd say the majority of people believe that. And so that can be a doorway into an exploration of, okay, well, what is that? And for example, I love doing parts work stuff with people. And and so I do this specific meditation where I have someone, it's a visualization. So I have them visualize a stage, like a theater, and there's a stage, there's a bunch of seats in the audience, there's a spotlight on the stage. I have them take a seat in the audience and then connect with a particular feeling. Some Usually it's whatever's present, whatever's been triggered. Reach into their in the visualization, they reach into their body, they pull out this feeling, it's a particular part of themselves, they place it on the stage,
Mm.
and then they relate to it. And so it's so fun. I love doing that because it creates a direct experience of this quality of experience that just a second ago I felt like it was me. Now it's something separate. And so what am I? And this starts to, when you do parts work, it starts to open the door to non-duality.
Interesting.
Because if I can always separate from the part and observe it non-judgmentally, differentiate from it, then there's an aspect of my being that isn't a part.
Mm.
I did a training. I wasn't actually there for the whole thing, so I have to watch the replay, but I did a training with Locke Kelly, who I think he studied under Adyashanti, or they worked together in some capacity. But he's the LCSW. And so this training was about combining IFS with his modality that he calls effortless mindfulness. And and yeah, it was a beautiful presentation, but also just like shows how what I just said, that like there is an aspect of us that isn't, it's not a part. Like you can keep identifying part after part after part, and then you can identify the part of you that's aware of awareness, but you can't get to the final destination, which is that there is an aspect, I guess we could call it a part, but but it's not accurate. There's a context, the foundational context of experience that cannot be pulled apart. You can't actually look at it because it's the one doing the seeing.
Mm.
And so doing parts work with people, you'll eventually get there if it's appropriate.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I know that, internal family systems has been very probably influenced by different spiritual traditions. Uh, do you mind if I ask a question and kind of like a mini excursion? I just wanted to
Do it.
clarify. You said you were a Buddhist for many years. Do you still consider yourself Buddhist or something else?
I think I'm something else. I I don't feel like a Buddhist. So yeah, I mean, for at least 10 years, I identified as a Buddhist. And mainly I was into Zen and Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. And and it's interesting because I guess I still am. I still practice Zen. I still practice Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, but I don't feel like a Buddhist. So whatever that means. Um,
Eh,
I just feel like because I also love Christianity. I love Jesus. I love um, Christian mysticism, and mysticism in general is what I'm into. So I guess you could call me a mystic, which I've heard it defined as just turning inward to find the truth about the nature of reality, which is at the core of every major religion.
well, I guess a mystical tradition of every religion. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Uh,
somebody calls it the perennial philosophy. I think maybe it was Aldous Huxley.
yes, yeah. And he was a big LSD user.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So yeah, so I guess I'd be comfortable being called a mystic, and that I'm maybe more Buddhist than other things if we have to say something.
Mm, yeah.
So I'd love to bring this back down to earth. Not that we left Earth really, but just to come back to where we started, which was about horror stories of therapy.
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
So the most common story, which isn't really a horror story, this is more the story of mediocrity. And it's the one that you told. It's they were really nice. They were really nice. You know, I have some clients who have said this. They were like, "Well, I didn't really want to stop with the person because they were nice." And I would go and talk about things, and maybe they'd say some stuff, maybe they'd ask some questions, but mostly it was just me talking about stuff.
right,
And they were nice, and they think that that's what therapy is because they haven't experienced something else.
right.
And it's this is the tricky thing, and I think we did touch on this before, but that in a way therapy is what you make it. You being the therapist and you being the client. And so then you two come together with both of your ideas about what therapy is, and then that's what it's going to be for both of you.
Right, right.
And so some people, and I have clients like this, are in a place where what they seem to want is to vent.
Sure.
They want a space because for whatever reason they feel like they don't have one. They can't talk to other people in this way, in such a vulnerable, transparent way. And so they want to use therapy like that. And and I don't judge them for that. I think that's fine. And it that can provide some benefit. And if someone feels like it's benefiting them, then great. But it isn't my preferred method of operation. Um, there's always going to be a little bit of that, but I prefer to get more into the Socratic questioning and the deeper layers of stuff and what's going on in the unconscious and all that, all the
Yeah,
parts and everything.
yeah.
But again, yeah, so it's kind of it's this combination of what you as the client bring as your conception of therapy, and then you as the therapist, what you bring is your conception of therapy, and those two things come together. If the client has a perception or conception of therapy that for example, like what we were talking about, where they think it's about venting and they just haven't experienced something else, well, then that's where me as the therapist, I would come in and be like, these are your options. Here's all the things we can do together. This is what therapy can be. What do you want it to be?
Yeah. I think that's perfect. And that's kind of where what I'm leaning towards. I've even made a PowerPoint for this so that because I feel like that would be if a therapist would have explained what you explained more in depth and just gave me options, I think that would have gone a long way because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mhm.
Like I just didn't know what therapy was exactly supposed to be and parts work and all this. I don't know. Um, yeah. So like, if I just had some clarity, it's like, okay, these are some of the things that it could look like. It could look like a combination of things. We can try blah blah blah, and then what do you want? What do you want to work on? Just a small question with a big impact. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. So I don't know where I was going with that. I was just commenting on that, and I think, yeah, I think that's really really good to keep it very client centered, to get feedback, to see what their expectations are, and go from there. So yeah,
And so much of it depends for me to I mean, this is saying the same thing kind of, but it's so much of it depends on where the client's at.
yeah,
And I don't force people to talk about non-duality. Um, so in that way, I feel like I don't proselytize it exactly. However, if they're open to it, I provide education about it
sure.
and maybe pointers to experience. And I share about my experience. And so I wanted to get into this too, that, we've talked about what therapy is and can be, but we haven't exactly got into the orientation of the therapist. Like, I had a thought and now it's drifting away. The role of the therapist. And for example, this is one aspect of the role. It's to what degree do you share about your own life? And we've had conversations offline about this.
Yeah.
Um, and the general training, I don't know if it's still like this, but I think so, seems to be, is mostly don't self-disclose stuff. And you should, as a therapist, you should only self-disclose if it is relevant to the client's experience, like it's going to support them in the process.
Yeah.
And I think that right there is a huge gray area to determine
Oh,
what,
what is actually clinically relevant and
yeah,
supportive? I got you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then also from more of what I believe would be a humanistic perspective, it's like if I'm just being in relationship with someone, how do I be in relationship with someone?
Right. Right.
And to me, it's weird. It would be a weird relationship if I didn't share to the degree that I do. That's the line for me. It's like,
Mm.
at what point is it a is it weird? Like, at what point is it not real intimacy? And should we have real intimacy?
That's a good question because I've heard one of the criticisms of therapy is that it's emotional prostitution. And part of me kind of agrees. it is a manufactured. I mean, it's not to say it isn't real, because it is real. You know, it's a real it. In one sense, it is a very real intimacy and it's a real relationship, and yet it's a relationship with certain boundaries, and it's been defined, right? Um, yeah, and it costs money. Let's be real.
Why would it be called emotional prostitution? I don't quite get it.
Good question, because I had to read more in depth on that criticism. I think it's because, like, if you go to a prostitute, you are paying money for some kind of, right, like, uh, for intimacy, for sex. And I think analogously, people pay therapists um in a way that can mimic it, right? But rather than sex, it's for emotional fulfillment, regulation, some kind of thing, right? Like you're you're selling this type of relationship uh, to meet some kind of emotional need at some level.
Hmm, interesting. I don't entirely disagree, but I think where I think I mostly disagree, which is that if it's how it should be, in my view, if the therapy is good, then it's not making you reliant on the therapist,
Right. Right.
and so it's not like meeting, it's not fulfilling a need that uh, where it's like indefinite, like indefinitely fulfilling a need, and that you're reliant on this relationship to fulfill this need. It's more like maybe it does fulfill some needs. I think it does. But hopefully that is a temporary state of affairs where you can then learn how to create the circumstances in your life that will fulfill these needs elsewhere.
Yeah.
It- yeah, mostly.
Yeah. And again, yeah, I wouldn't 100% agree. I don't, obviously, I wouldn't say, yeah, I'm going to school to be an emotional prostitute. Yeah, that's silly. But I think there might be an element of that, but I also do think if done properly, I think therapy is much more than that, and it actually results in genuine, deep transformation. So, but I guess I was saying that because you were asking about, is there this therapeutic relationship and self-disclosure and real intimacy? Because in one sense, it is a it is somewhat an artificial relationship. I don't know if artificial is the right word. It's
It's like,
such a fine line, because when your job is to talk about very deep, vulnerable, personal, emotional issues, it makes it kind of dicey. Like if you go to some workplace, right? I think the boundaries are much more defined. It's a professional relationship, and sure, you could open up and talk about that stuff, but generally, you want to keep it within work appropriate type of conversation, and but since our role is not that, and it's different. Yeah, it's just like a fine line. I didn't. Sorry, I interrupted you. So what were you saying?
you interrupted me?
Were you about to say something?
Oh, I don't remember. Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So, okay, so another horror story that I have
Aha.
was from my grandma. She went to therapy years ago, which way before it was cool. Um, and I forget exactly what she was going for, if she was getting divorced at the time, or I don't remember. Something was happening. But the therapist was, I think, getting a divorce at the time. And the therapist then was talking about her relationship and the divorce and crying during session. And so my grandma said she felt like she had to support this therapist. And
Yeah.
so that is a clear violation, a boundary violation there.
Right.
And to me, there's nothing therapeutically relevant about that. So I do actually like that definition of self-disclosure should be used when it's therapeutically relevant.
Yeah.
I mostly like that definition because I think there's a little bit, I think you can step a little bit outside of that. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. And it's not harmful. It actually can be really supportive of rapport and trust. My first therapist, I've been extremely lucky with all my therapists. My first therapist was great. And he did share about his life, but it was very, I don't know, I'm having trouble remembering actually. I think it was pretty limited. And every single time, every session, I saw him for 10 years,
Dang. Okay.
and it was a long time.
Yeah.
And every session, I would say, "How are you?" at the beginning. And he would say, "I'm okay." That's it. Never gave me anything else. And that's interesting. But he would share about his life sometimes, about his kids, about um, some, he would use things as examples. But I actually like to be a little bit more real about what I'm feeling because I think it also normalizes the fact that we go through things,
Right.
just humans. And it doesn't, what can happen is sometimes people think that therapists, maybe they put them on a pedestal, or they think like, oh, this person is healthy. This is the the fully formed human,
Right.
healthy, and all the relationships are perfect and whatever. And it's like I like to normalize the mess by sharing a bit about it, but not too much.
Right.
So that's tricky. Not too much. What the
It
hell does
is.
that mean?
Yeah. It's almost like an art, right?
Yeah, it is an art, but I think I have shared too much before, and I can feel it when it becomes too much. And then I'm like, oh, let me stop there.
Yeah.
I quickly, if when that happens, just something in me, maybe it's not even that it's become too much, but I'm approaching too much, then I'm like, I turn it immediately back on them. Because most of my clients ask me how I'm doing or how my day is. And depending on how I feel, I might just say, I'm okay. Or or I might be a little more specific and talk about, I don't know, how I'm going through some old stuff, or um it's snowing outside, or whatever. But then I feel like it's approaching too much focus on me, then I turn it back on them.
Right. Right. I had a thought, but it disappeared. Yeah, I think self-disclosure is something that I think I'm getting more comfortable with. I don't know. As I continue to unveil layers, subtle layers of wanting to not be vulnerable or feeling like I need to put on a mask. It's very unconscious, right? But I think the more that I continue to transmute, to allow and accept and uh, change these different unconscious processes, I do feel more open, like just to relationships in general.
Mhm.
Is it fully there? Probably not. But yeah, yeah. I was going to ask something about self-disclosure, but I don't really think it's a intelligent question. What are you going to say?
I was going to say that I think this comes from more of a non-dual perspective, but it's like, yeah, there's something I want to get at here.
Yeah.
Hold on. Luna's on my headphones. Um, if I believe that I'm Kevin and that's all that I am, then it's like I'm I might believe that I am the one conducting therapy. Like it's all on me and I have to
Mm.
know what to do and when to do it and rely on my education and training and whatever. Be trained in the right modality to do it all. And while I do partially agree with that, and that gets into the whole non-dual paradox shit, um, I feel like I'm a pawn in the process. And I mean that in a couple of different ways. One related to self-disclosure, that it's like why would I like I'm just a player on the stage. I'm
Mm.
just like an actor on the stage. And this actor has gone through different experiences. And then I can share about the experiences this actor has gone through as ways to connect with the client, demonstrate certain ideas, or provoke insight into their own experience because they can compare their experience to this actor. And so I feel divorced from myself in that way, where it's like, it's not personal. I can share about sexual issues that I've had. And that doesn't feel personal to me. I'm just talking about this actor. Now, if I was still going through it, then it's a little more personal. But even then, I don't know, kind of depends.
So you mainly use stuff from the past, uh, possibly.
Probably mainly, I don't know, dude. I mean, the past could be 5 minutes ago.
Fair. Yeah. What is the past?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I did share in this past week with a client. We were talking about attachment styles. I think it was this week or maybe the previous one. And I shared about something very recently that happened that brought up like maybe 2 days before the session
Wow.
that brought up some anxious attachment stuff for me and what it looked like and how I approached it. And so that's an example of how I'll use self-disclosure. It wasn't about me. It wasn't like let's process my experience together. It was just like this is, and maybe that's the difference. It's like it depends how how processed something is,
Sure.
because I'm not gonna process with them about my experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, So yeah, I guess that's it. So then to me, then it's just telling a story. It could be about somebody else, but it just happens to be about me.
Hmm. No, I like that. I forget that we're all players on a stage. I just don't know if I like the word pawn. It has certain connotations. But I assume what what you mean is that you're a vessel for the divine and for divine work. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
like that. Vessel is a good word. Um, and that leads to the next part of the picture that I wanted to paint, which is about synchronicity. And I don't, I'm not actually like that read up on Carl Jung, but I believe he coin the term?
I think he either coined it or used it or made it popular. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the idea behind synchronicity, as I understand it, and let me know if you understand it differently, is that there seems to be some sort of inherent intelligence in the unfolding of life where, um, for example, this happens all the time, where I go through something in my own life and then six clients talk about it the following week. Like they talk about an experience that they went through where this thing is applicable.
Right.
It happens all the time.
Huh.
And I don't know if Carl Jung, I mean, I think he did later in his life, which is when people started to discredit him or think he was a little bit out there or something. But he got more, I think over time, he got more into non-dual realization and spiritual stuff.
Oh, I didn't know he was into non-dual stuff. I know he was definitely influenced by like some esoteric things, magic and whatnot.
I don't know if he used the word non-dual, but he was basically talking about it. And so, but I don't know when he was using the term synchronicity, I don't know if he was thinking of it like there's an inherent intelligence operating in life, or if it was more about like unconscious alignment.
Yeah,
Was
I
it
don't
that?
know.
Okay.
I no, I'm definitely not well read in Carl Jung.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
yeah, for sure. Which is odd because I like a lot of his ideas, but and like he's more spiritual, so it would align with what I value and what I believe. So it is interesting. I just haven't really read that much. But fun fact, and then we'll get back to this. Do you know why Freud was so uh he was so needing to defend his ideas about repression and sex? Do you know what he admitted to Carl Jung? He said, because the sexual doctrine is a bulwark against the occult.
What's a bulwark? What does that mean?
Like a fortress or like a
Uh,
wall, like a defense. It's a defense against the occult.
Against the occult. How so?
I don't know, but in his mind, affirming his view of human sexuality and repression and the unconscious was somehow a defense against the occult. But I suppose if he believed that, then the occult stuff wasn't true, or I don't know. But yeah, he admitted that to Carl Jung. Anyways,
Huh.
that's a fun little fact. Yeah, yeah, interesting stuff. I do think Freud actually got a lot of things right, and he
Yeah.
was a missing, he was a product of his time. So, uh, anyways, coming back to synchronicities.
Oh, yeah. So I looked it up real quick.
Yeah.
Um, so according to Carl Jung, synchronicity, it referred to meaningful coincidences that occur when an inner psychological state corresponds to to an event in the outer world without a causal connection. According to Jung, these coincidences suggest a deeper order or meaning to the universe, transcending the notion of cause and effect. He believed that recognizing and reflecting on these events could enhance self-awareness and provide guidance.
Sure. Yeah.
So, to me, this is, and I think I had mentioned this in previous conversations, but to me, the divine hand is always at play in the therapeutic process. That it's that is what is guiding it, and it's not me, and I am a vessel. I view it as like channeling almost. I get out of the way, and then whatever wants to come through me comes through me, and that's often what it feels like. And that there's a great reliance on synchronicity in this process. I just
Interesting.
I just trust that what I say about, for example, about my experience, maybe what I went through a few days ago or something I've experienced in my life, but whatever comes into my mind as this is the thing to share, that I can trust that it's going to have a synchronistic relationship to their psyche and what's present for them. It's going to somehow land in just the right way to either, and the interesting thing is it could land in the right way in a bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to be like I say the thing and then they're like, "Oh my God,"
Mhm.
aha
Yep.
moment.
Yep.
But it could be that, or it could be like, "Oh, yeah, that helps me make sense of this experience that I'm having when I apply that story to my own experience." Or sometimes it'll just be like, "Oh, well that doesn't actually resonate. That doesn't actually apply. And here's why." And then they go down the right path for them. And to me, it's like magic. It's like watching magic happen. And I don't do that. That's not like something that I have control over. But I just like open up and get present and trust that there's this flow of wisdom that exists between us or around us or within us that's going to guide the process.
Hmm.
And what a load off that is, as far as like assuming responsibility. So many therapists have imposter syndrome,
Oh yeah.
or they really carry the weight of the work. And I've done that. It took me many years to stop,
Mm.
mostly stop. I
Yeah.
feel like I do it now. I do it more with couples because I feel less confident in that realm.
Right. Right.
But yeah, to have that shift where it's like, oh, I'm not I mean, I am like professionally, ethically, that stuff. I am responsible. So I'm not just like throwing everything out the window and being like, I can say whatever all the time. And it doesn't matter if I harm them. That's God. God's doing it or whatever. uh,
Terrible.
I'm not going that direction, um, but yeah, I'm I'm fine with the word pawn, but I am a
Mm.
vessel or a pawn. I'm being used in this process. And so it's not entirely on me. I don't have to sit here and figure it out.
Right. I do feel like I was taught pretty similarly, just without the whole God thing. And the idea was if you simply don't put it in your conclusions, right? You just get very present and let go of attachment to the outcome and get curious. And you're not trying to solve anything. As soon as you're trying to think of how do I solve this, it's just all it gets into control and this conscious loop and you get attached to the outcome, right? But if you simply just get curious and you don't think about trying to solve it, that's when paradoxically, usually the best work comes out.
So we've been talking for almost 2 hours.
Wow.
Um, yeah, how much you got left in the tank?
I don't know. Depends on the topic. I mean, I could keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe another 20 minutes or something. Well, it
Yeah,
depends.
sure.
Um, where do we go from here? Okay, so we're talking about horror stories.
And then I went into Divine Hand, horror stories of the Divine Hand. You know, obviously, I think from an outsider's perspective, it's always easy, and I say this for myself, it's always easy to criticize and hear these things, right? So it's interesting, because I'm in groups with different practitioners, right? And even though we're not licensed clinicians, a lot of people they've gone through a lot of therapists and then they seek maybe somebody else that they feel like maybe they could help me, in some way. So, and in this group, somebody actually got like a client that's gone to different therapists, and one of the therapists, their last therapist said for like their anxiety or something that, oh, you should just look at the clouds. And that was literally their therapeutic solution to, yeah, it's like, holy crap, bro. Okay. But I say that I say that also with the awareness that I'm sure stupid shit can come out of me and has come out of me. And so I don't want to sit here on my high horse and and think that I am just so much better and superior to these people. I mean, possibly in some ways I am. I'm not going to say I am or not. I just don't want to be that person that, because things happen, shit I'm learning, I'm sure when I look back on all these different sessions that I've done in the past, when I think about some like the stuff when I started out, I'm like, I cringe. Like, holy crap. And I'm sure 5, 10 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this, and that, or didn't do this, and that in this way. So I guess maybe I am also wanting to be humble and say this probably could happen to me too, and I'm learning. So,
Yeah, going back to the very beginning, we're talking about therapeutic rupture. I've said some things that I still feel bad about. Not too much, not too often, didn't happen too much, but there's one person in particular I'm thinking of. And uh, yeah, I just wish I would have handled it differently. And it wasn't like all on me. There was a dynamic at play, much like we were talking about at the beginning. There was countertransference and transference present.
right.
Um, but at the time, my ability to just be in the discomfort of that was not my capacity wasn't high enough to stay with it.
Yeah.
So then I said something to get out of the situation.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I just wish I had done it differently.
I get that.
But that is part of this thing of being a therapist, being a human in relationship. I think outside of therapy, I've done that way more in in my
Uh,
relationships.
yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know really know where to take this. I guess the very, very beginning we were talking about ruptures, and I suppose no way to close things out. I don't know if it's
I
important. It's important to know how to repair these ruptures, and that's what, that's what I need to learn. Um, I don't know if you have anything to say on rupture and repair, because I don't.
I don't know. My understanding is that in some psychodynamic approaches, they actually rely pretty heavily on transference
Sure.
as part of the process. And I don't think about it that much. It doesn't seem to be as important to me.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe I could think about it more. I don't know. But it like my I think this has to do with my typology, is my personality. I believe I am a nine in Enneagram,
The
which
peacemaker.
yeah. And so rupture does not happen often for me. It's like I'm just kind of oriented in this way where I think my approach is pretty gentle. Even when I'm being direct, I'm gradual with it, and I put in a lot of qualifiers and explanation to help ease through defenses. And and that's my style, and that's not going to be true for everybody.
Yeah.
So the quality of my relationships with clients is, I'd say, it's really high, and
Hmm.
and there's a lot of trust and not much conflict between us, not much opportunity for rupture. So yeah, to um so thinking about repairing it, I'd say this happens more in couples therapy because it's a lot easier than you've got two whole ass people with very different views on something who are in conflict, and then I might be saying something that's validating one person, but then the other person feels like that is invalidating them.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
so I think this is where like couples and family therapy gets real tricky. Um, and so yeah, so I don't know. But to me it's just like, well, then I just explain. I try to um, be attuned to people's reactions, and I'm like, oh, it looks like you had a reaction to that. What was that about? Or something. So that I get curious about it, and they can tell me if they feel like I was invalidating them. Or I say a lot, this isn't about right or wrong. That's part of what fuels conflict in relationship, is this attachment to one of us is right and the other is wrong. And so I'm not saying you're right and your partner is wrong here, but I am affirming what your experience is. And so I'll just explain things to the best of my ability and then watch how people react. Um, but it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, I bet. Couples therapy is another ball game, it seems.
There was a whole can of worms I was thinking about opening. I don't know if it would be better saved for another episode. I feel like maybe
What
I'm starting to run out of steam.
what is it?
Um, well, you were talking about that therapist that said they were addressing anxiety by saying, look at the clouds.
Yeah.
Um, and it was the initial thing I had texted you that we could talk about, like what anxiety and depression are. And, that what the look at the clouds thing, it's almost the same as like, here, take this pill.
Mm. No.
It's addressing it from a maybe it might not exactly be a medical model approach, but it's like a mental illness approach, viewing it like it's yeah, it's its own, I don't know. It's like it exists in a vacuum.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I feel like that might be a really long conversation.
Yeah, I think however many minutes ago, 10 minutes ago when I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." Now I'm like I'm feeling it for whatever reason. I thought that I was okay, but now I'm like, yeah, I'm petered out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Is there anything left to say to like tie some of these ends together? Um, yeah, my brain's like, I don't even know. We talked about a lot,
Yeah.
as usual. Um, I think there's something. I'm just going back through our whole conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, my mind, it's just not working anymore. Um,
How did we even get on the horror story stuff?
we were talking about rupture.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
So I do want to say that something that I really encourage people to do, and it's difficult. The system that we have makes it difficult if you can't pay out of pocket. If you're trying to go through insurance, then it's harder because sure, you can go through all these Psychology Today profiles that all say really similar things. Um, and find people that are covered through your insurance, or maybe you get a referral through your insurance, but it's like it's basically rolling the dice. Who
Yeah.
who are you gonna get?
Right.
And so I do like to put this out there to have conversations with people about this because I think it can get really disheartening, the process of trying to find the right therapist for you right now. And I like to say, give it a few sessions
Yeah.
and see. Sometimes you don't need to do that if someone's saying they're going to make you popular at the end or whatever. Um, or there was some other story I didn't tell, but someone was it was a Christian therapist and she was like trying to make this person Christian. And so
That's another
that's
conversation. I
yeah.
think that's actually relevant, right? Because from a Christian standpoint, they also see Christianity as a the end of suffering in a sense, right? The
Yeah.
ultimate truth, right?
Yeah. That would be from their perspective, that would be seeing reality clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Um, so sometimes immediately that it's not a good fit, but generally give it a few sessions and just keep trying. you know, just don't give up with it. I mean, I I don't know how I've gotten so lucky, but maybe part of it, at least with recent therapists, I think they were like younger than me and newer to being therapists than me. But I can kind of conduct my own therapy. Like I need a therapist there,
Yeah.
and then I can just like do it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
And
It's
so
just somebody
that's
that helps you bounce ideas off of. It's like this container, right? And it helps. It yeah.
yeah, I don't need a lot of direction or education. And so maybe that makes it very different. But for a lot of people, finding someone to do the quality of work that you want to do, the depth of work that you want to do is tricky. And unfortunately, I think I don't know what the numbers are, but I feel my assumption is that the majority of therapists aren't well trained in this. Like, I'm very critical, so I'll put that out there. But I just want everyone to be deeper, and I don't think they're deep enough.
I'm critical too, and this is where I feel torn because am I being too critical, right? Am I not taking a more humble stance? Am I not maybe I'm not seeing clearly. I think that's my tendency, right? That's just my temperament, my personality, right? I don't know if I'm a nine on the Enneagram, but I could be a nine. I have no
You,
idea.
you could be.
I could be. And so my temperament is always like I don't assume I generally tend to assume like what am I doing wrong? You know. So maybe that's that. But yeah, I don't know if I'm being like overly critical because I can do that. Um, but yeah, man, like this is why people actually go to hypnotists. And it's so interesting that I hear people in the community, they got into hypnosis because they went to therapy and nothing was changing. Then they saw a hypnotist and it was like their world turned around, you know. And I'm sure they had still work to do, but it was like an experience and it seemed to transform, like it seemed to actually get something fundamentally changed. And then so yeah, it's like I don't want to be an arrogant prick, like I said in the first episode, but yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Where's the line here? Where's the line? Where we can be critical, but from authoritative and a genuine care for the field and for clients, you know, I don't know. I don't know if I'm being overly critical.
Well, and you know, it's like the vast majority of therapists, I think, are are really decent, caring, loving human beings
Yeah.
that just want the best for everybody.
Yeah.
That seems true to me.
Yeah.
And 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 a lot of them are intelligent and bright and they have of some degree of self-awareness. And but this is the dead horse that I will not stop beating for the rest of my life, probably, is that the field is is fostering a particular approach which emphasizes education outside of direct experience. And
I okay. I mean, I don't feel like that's wrong inherently. I think there's value to that.
I think that there's value to it. I think that emphasizing it over direct experience is a mistake because, I go in these therapist groups online and people ask, like they say, I'm feeling stuck with this client. What should I do? And then the vast majority of comments are, well, you could do a training in somatic experiencing.
Right.
You could do a training in DBT, whatever.
Yeah.
Education and training.
Right.
And mind you, I think that it's important. It greatly depends on who's doing the training
Yes.
because they could create an experience in the training if it's a good training.
Yeah.
Um, but but it's an orientation thing. I think that the orientation shouldn't be default. Oh, I need more education and training and skills necessarily. I mean, that sounds great, but the first thing to me is there deeper I could go with myself?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's going to allow me to see more because that's to me, and we've talked about this a little bit. It depends on the person, the presentation of their distress. But for generally for the clients that I see, if I ever feel stuck, it would be because it's unfamiliar territory for me. And so then either I can familiarize myself with that territory by going deeper in my own process, or if it's completely not applicable to me because it's just an experience I can't have, like their emotional experience or their symptomology or maybe it's like part of their personal experience, just maybe they're a woman and there's something specific that I can't experience, then I would have to rely on education, training, listening to other people talk about it. But I think that's the order, ideally.
Yeah. And I think in the past, I probably would have been more resistant to that idea. Uh, and I don't know if resistant is the right word. Like, I guess I think the logical thing to do is to go to what training, what skill set, what supervision or whatever it is externally do I need? And I think there's a lot of value to that. It is interesting now I'm becoming more spiritual, I guess, in a way. That and this relates back to our conversation about, what is ultimate reality? What is the orientation, right? And I do think the first question should be, at least for me, I'm not saying for everyone, but for me as a spiritually oriented person, the first question would be, is there some part of me, if I'm feeling stuck with a client, if there's some part of me that I am not willing to look at, or I'm not seeing, or I'm not feeling, right? Something unconscious that I just don't know about. And I do think there is some kind of weirdly a relationship when I untie my shit, something will happen in in the external world, in my relationships with other people. Um, so yeah, I do think you're right. We should look at ourselves first. And but like, and I guess and taking it from another vantage point, right? When someone posts this stuff on Facebook, like I'm stuck with this client, it's so vague. I just like don't know. I don't know you're just relaying what your memory of the post, but I'm sure like there's only so much information I can gather from a post, right? I'm not there in the session. And I think that's actually partly a detriment to what to the field that we're trying to keep confidentiality, of course, but it's so it's so protected that nobody can see what is actually happening in the session. And so it's very difficult to improve, you know. But anyways, that's kind of just like another vantage point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true. And I mean, yeah, these therapists, they're maintaining confidentiality, so they're able to present a vague picture of what's happening, but not the specifics of it necessarily. And that does also make it
Yeah.
trickier.
Like I can't if I don't know the specifics, like how is my advice going to be specific, targeted and valuable and relevant? It could be. I mean, I guess maybe if you took a SE training, that it could work. I don't know, you know.
And that's why some of the comments are like, seek supervision.
Yeah, that's my answer, right? That's the correct textbook don't get sued answer. And I think that's yeah. And maybe that's a whole other can of worms, right? Because, you're talking about insurance companies, right? And that's part of the system, and you can only get so far with it. Um, but yeah, there's like a culture of do it through insurance. Well, of course, if I had insurance, I would do it, I don't want to pay however much money if I could save a lot of, like 90, 80%, however much the insurance is willing to pay. I get that. Like, I want to save money too. So, and then at the same time, therapists don't want to be sued. And so then you got to do things by the book, by the insurance companies, by what's the safest thing to do that's not going to get me sued. I get it.
Yeah. There were a couple of things you said that could turn into a whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just like, do I want to do that?
And now you're
Um,
glowing. The light is,
uh,
yeah,
um, yeah, I'll save that one for later. Well, I'll just say it out loud so that we can remember together. Just
sure.
this conversation about insurance and how insurance wants us to operate. Like they're still in the medical model stuff, and so the documentation I have to submit or I have to keep has to prove medical necessity, and that's based on the DSM or the ICD-10,
Mhm.
and so then there's just an emphasis coming from insurance, from the payers, that this is how we're supposed to be approaching things.
Right.
Symptom, solution.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that more later. Um,
Awesome.
but to come back and tie up what I was saying about selecting a therapist, that yeah, because you're going through insurance, it is going to be that roll of a dice thing. And it's like you just have to. I had I had thought this all out really clearly at one point. I was trying to remember it. But basically it's like there are a few factors involved. It's like getting a sense of, is this therapist knowledgeable, wise, or skilled enough for me? And then there's, do we vibe? Is there a good vibe between us? And I thought there was a third thing. Maybe that's it. Those are the main things, right?
Uh, if you're asking me what my criteria is,
Yeah.
I think I'm biased because now that I have all this therapy knowledge, so that like, now I know I'm kind of like, oh, I'm looking for this. For me, are they going to be experiential? Wow, that looks so different. Oh my gosh. I don't know what you
Sorry.
did. Like, that's so crazy. How,
Something's
how, yeah.
Something's wrong with my camera. I've got a new one coming.
Oh, nice, nice. Um, yeah, to me, experiential is a big component. I think that was probably part of my gripe with my very first therapist. It's just like there wasn't anything experiential. And I was getting experiential techniques and grounding and emotional releasing and all these, uh, all these things with my coach, and that was helping. And so yeah, I think that's for me personally a very big component.
Does that fall under skill,
That's a good question.
or
I
it's
suppose so.
it's approach, I guess.
Skill and approach, there's overlap in those. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I think you were using the word orientation, but in a specific way, not I don't know if you're talking about theoretical orientation uh in this podcast. But yeah, I do have preferences on orientation and where's I going with that? I don't know. Yeah, skill. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember what I was going with that. And maybe this could be another another podcast episode. But I'm torn between so the psychological literature, the psychotherapeutic literature says that essentially if you measure all the studies from all these different orientations of humanistic, CBT, psychodynamic, all these different things, well, they all actually like there's no like statistical significant difference between them. If you just crunch all the numbers, they all kind of get the same therapeutic results, same outcomes. And so the idea is, well, it really doesn't matter what theoretical orientation you come from. You pick one that jives with your personality, which I think that's important, right? Is congruent with you, that you believe in, and you just go with that because the studies show that there's no therapeutic difference in the outcomes. And part of me believes that because I do think it's like, okay, it's really important that you choose something that you believe in and that you're congruent with. But another part of me has been kind of like doubting that recently. And I'm wondering, I truly wonder, does modality and theoretical orientation truly make a difference? Part of me believes that is the case. And yeah, I'm wrestling with it. Yeah.
Hmm. And I think this is probably obvious, but I think that I probably strongly believe that. And
If it were up to you, we'd all be non-dual creatures.
well, and this is like the orientation that I'm constructing, that I consider to be my life's work is 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 this overarching framework of modalities. It's like a bunch of modalities crammed together and a bunch of orientations crammed together, but all couched within this context of non-duality.
Hmm.
And and to me, I wonder, absolutely no evidence for this. Maybe future studies can be done on this, but I wonder if one of the reasons why there's no statistically significant difference between these orientations or modalities is because they're not addressing this fundamental thing, which is our identification with our experience. In a way, they kind of do, some of them,
Yeah, I think the mindfulness stuff. Yeah.
but it's like it's little shifts.
Hmm.
It's like it's yeah, these little shifts in orientation, but it's not like the full recognition that that is not me. That's like a completely different experience to get to the place where I could be in an intense emotion and be identified with it and then shift on my own because I know how to do it now. I can
Hmm.
shift my relationship to this part of my experience from subject to object. So I'm identified with it, and now I'm disidentified with it,
Hmm.
and then and that completely transforms the experience. And so I think a lot of these other modalities, it's like maybe more gradual. I mean, this is still, to me, it's still kind of gradual anyway. Um, Doing the disidentification process, it's not like it always happens just like that,
Yeah.
but it's deep. It's
Hmm.
deep, and I feel the qualitative difference in my life.
Hmm.
And if that's the thing that we're measuring, which I don't know what they were measuring in that study, but
Right.
if that's the thing we're measuring, then I do believe that there are modalities or orientations that create more of that. And I guess that's why I'm so passionate on the verge of proselytizing about this.
I get that. I have an inner evangelist for sure. Um,
So to tie it back together, the things that you can pay attention to when you're looking for a therapist, it's skill level, knowledge level, wisdom level. I kind of just combine all those together, orientation, and then whether or not you vibe.
yeah.
And the those things are also, I think, dependent on the moment. Like where you are right now, what you're going through right now. You might vibe with someone who's doing one particular thing, one particular approach
Hmm.
now, and
Right.
then 5 years from now, you wouldn't vibe with that and you'd need something completely different.
That's fair. Yeah.
But it's just giving it a chance and also I want to say like I know that it's hard for a lot of people to at the beginning to share your whole history. For some people, it's like so it's really hard to go back into these traumatic events and just really emotional stuff and lay it all out for somebody. And so there's a huge resistance to wanting to find another therapist and do that again if this first one doesn't work. And
Yeah.
I can understand that, but I just want to encourage people um, to do it anyway. You know, if you feel like the needle is barely moving, then go try and find someone else. Roll the dice again and see what happens. And you'll get more and more comfortable with laying it all out there.
Right. Yeah. You owe it to yourself to find somebody.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, or watching, and we will see you next time.
Cheers.
Goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye.